Hi, my name's Zena. I'm just a Swiftie with an English degree, and today I wanted to talk to you about one of the songs that I have been most excited to discuss, but also the most intimidated by. Let's talk about Maroon. Maroon is track 2 on Midnights, which was released on October 21st of 2022. And while Tortured Poets Department is Taylor Swift's most recent album, we have found ourselves looking back at Midnights more and more because we may have missed some stuff. The Tortured Poets Department, as we all know, everybody was expecting it to be about the breakup between Joe Alwyn and Taylor Swift, but in reality, when we actually got the Tortured Poets Department, a lot of the songs seem to refer to Maddie Healy, which from our perspective, as mere Swifties, from our perspective, we thought that Taylor and Joe had been happy their entire 6+ year relationship, and we thought that the relationship between Taylor Swift and Maddie Healy had been just like a 1-month blip, but ne'er did we know, little did we know, that Maddie Healy had been a part of Taylor Swift's story for at least a decade. And the more that we look at her lyrics and the more that we understand the Tortured Poets Department and the more that we analyze the things that we do know as factual, the more that we can see the little Easter eggs littered across her entire discography pointing to this potential thing with Maddie Healy. If you're interested in Taylor Swift deep dives like this and you're interested in what the lyrics and the lore might mean, don't forget to subscribe. I would love to talk about this with as many people as I possibly can because we have a lot to discuss. So, before we talk about Maroon, I think it's important that we talk about Red because Maroon is, at its base, just a more mature version of Red. Red, which we know was released in 2012, is Taylor Swift's, I consider to be like her magnum opus. It's All Too Well is on Red, and it is the first album where we see she really broke away from country, right? I mean, she was still a country artist at that time. I think they had allowed her to have like 3 pop songs only on Red, but that was the first time that she had truly gone like really mainstream was Red. So we look at Red and we look at the song Red from the album Red and we see a consistent story being told by Taylor here. And when we talk about the comparison between Red and Maroon, I think it's important that we remember that Taylor is an artist. She is a poet. She is just existing in the same headspace that she has her entire career. So when in 2012, she is writing using imagery for love and using red, that same imagery for Red, that same color imagery that she was using in 2012 is still there in her same headspace in 2022 when she writes Maroon. She is using the same artistic tools that she has always had. She is just kind of flexing them, redoing them, maturing her imagery as she writes. And so Red becomes Maroon. So we have to go to Red to look at what Red is telling us as what her description of love is. What is the significance of Red to her? And while I think it's important that we look at Red to understand Maroon because of the similar imagery that she clearly sees and expresses in her own headspace and in her own, writerly toolbox, I am not trying to imply at all that this song, our masterpiece that is Red, was written about Maddie Healy. I don't believe that at all to be the case. I think that this is just an artist who is using similar themes and similar imagery throughout her discography because she is living in her own same headspace this entire time. So we look to Red that has lyrics that say, loving him is like driving a new Maserati down a dead-end street. Loving him is like driving a new Maserati down a dead-end street. Which is literally saying, loving him is driving a sports car to a stop. No one drives a sports car just to stop it. It defeats the purpose. So you're driving a new Maserati, which is fun, but it's to nowhere. It's going to stop. It's a dead-end street. Faster than the wind, passionate as sin, ended so suddenly. Loving him is like trying to change your mind once you're already flying through the free fall. Loving him is like trying to change your mind once you're already flying through the free fall. When you are literally like skydiving, trying to change your mind. That is what loving him is like. Like the colors in autumn so bright just before they lose it all. Like the colors in autumn so bright just before they lose it all. So like the brightest red just before they die. Losing him was blue like I'd never known. Which I will say also, just as an aside, blue, I believe, is just Taylor's use of reflecting sadness, depression. I think that she uses blue for imagery for that, just in general. I don't think it's necessarily always about Joe. Missing him was dark gray, all alone. Forgetting him was like trying to know somebody you never met. But loving him was red. Getting him was like trying to know somebody you never met. 'Cause loving him was red. Loving him was red. So we see her using red here as a burning imagery for love. She literally says loving him was burning red. Loving him was red. Burning red. So we see this imagery here as just this bright, overpowering thing. I think red is imagery for love. But when we talk about how she is using red as imagery for love here, we're also seeing that the love isn't good. She says loving him is like driving a new Maserati down a dead-end street, faster than the wind, passionate as sin, ended so suddenly. What does that sound like to you? And just as an aside, I am not saying in any way, shape, or form that red is about Maddie Healy. I am not saying that at all. I do not believe that Taylor even knew Maddie during the Red era, and there's no evidence saying that they had actually physically met at this time. But there is, some evidence that she may have suggested that the 1975 joined her on the Red tour, but we don't have any evidence that they actually met. So I'm not saying that Red is about Maddie, though, is what I'm essentially trying to say. I think that as an artist, Taylor uses the same imagery because she lives and exists in her same headspace, right? So when she is thinking about love, when she is sitting down to write lyrics and she is thinking about things in her head, she is visualizing the imagery for love is red. It becomes maroon. It is just part of what she has in her writer toolbox. And so when we see these references and when we talk about lyrics like this, I also want to mention that it's not always about the same person, right? Because Taylor exists in her own headspace and she's going to use metaphor for different people, but it's going to mean the same or similar things to her because she's just the same person. I mean, I'm sure she does some specific things, but I'm just saying, like, it's not one for one at all. Everything is relative. We don't know what she's trying to say. We don't know anything specific. We are just reading lyrical tea leaves once again. So when I look at Red and I look at 2012 Taylor saying that love to her was this burning red that was faster than the wind, passionate as sin, yet ended so suddenly. And then we see in 2022 her come out with Maroon, which is essentially describing the exact same thing. Maroon, we're seeing a relationship that, again, it was faster than the wind, passionate as sin, but it ended. And we see that reflected in a Maroon as well. Once again, not saying that this is any way in shape and form about the same people, but I think that this same imagery is used here to reflect this situation because loving him was red, but it became maroon. And Taylor works in colors a lot with imagery and lyrics. We see it with red, we see it with blue, we see it with daylight, we see it with gray. She uses descriptors and colors a lot. So I really do genuinely think that it's just a part of her writer toolbox that she has a fascination with reflecting emotions with colors. And honestly, I love it. And now that we have discussed why red may be important, let's talk about maroon. This is a time period that we believe that Maddie Healy and Taylor Swift may have started to talk to each other more because they were both working with Jack. So when we look at Maroon, I think that it's interesting to think about this time period because I think that this was a time when Taylor was really in between. She had her relationship with Joe. I think that she was kind of, will we, won't we, what are we going to do with her relationship with Joe? Maybe she wasn't completely happy, but she wasn't really sure what she was going to do. She was in and out of it. And then I think that when she started to interact with Maddie more, maybe it brought up old feelings that she had in the past. And I think that that is what we're looking at here because we know that there was something that happened between Taylor Swift and Maddie Healy the winter of 2014. Likely it may have been in New York. I'm not really sure, but let's talk about it. Let's go over Maroon.
When the morning came, we were cleaning incense off your vinyl shelf because we lost track of time again.
When the morning came, we were cleaning incense off your vinyl shelf because we lost track of time again. And I think that this is important, right? Because this is showing Obviously, we had a midnight go over to a morning, right? Because now it's when the morning came. So a midnight has passed. We were cleaning incense off your vinyl shelf because we lost track of time again. And I think this mention of time is important because I think that a lot of this song exists in a memory or a flashback. I think that we kind of toggle between thoughts of a past and thoughts that are happening in the present with Maroon. And it continues with, laughing with my feet in your lap like you were my closest friend. And notice, she isn't saying that he is her closest friend. It's like he is her closest friend. I think that that's actually pointing out the fact that he's not, that this is special, that this is different, that this is like natural, that this is almost meant to be, because, you know, she's laughing with her feet in his lap like you were my closest friend. Like, how did that happen? How'd we end up on the floor anyway, you say? Your roommate's cheap-ass screw-top rosé. That's how. I see you every day now. And when I look at this song, I see this first verse as a memory of what happened. And in my headcanon, I think that this situation happened maybe in those early days when she had that supposed fling with Maddie Healy in 2014, early 2015. We don't really know any specifics, right? Like, we are reading lyrical tea leaves here. I do not know anything specific. We are speculating. But if I had to put a time period on it just based off of my best guesstimation, I would imagine that this was a very powerful moment that these two had with each other, and it felt like it meant a lot. And it feels to me like, remember, like when you were a teenager, like if you have ever sat back and had a moment where you were like, man, everything just feels right and like it's meant to be. And I think this is exactly what she felt with whatever this moment was, with whoever she had it with. She felt like in this moment, she was understood. She lost track of time with this person. Everything was perfect. She just fall in so seamlessly to this relationship. And I think that is kind of what she is expressing and what she's feeling here. But she breaks it in that final line and says, I see you every day now. And I think that that is a separator for it. Like, this moment happened then, but I see you every day now. And now we find out what happened, because she says, and I chose you, the one I was dancing with in New York with no shoes. I chose you. Looked up at the sky and it was. In the first part of this chorus here, she's saying, I chose you, the one I was dancing with in New York with no shoes. And we don't know when this happened. We do know that there was a 1975 concert that she went to in New York in, I believe it was November of 2014. I think it was the concert actually that she went with Carly Kloss and everything, like the concert. But clearly we were not paying attention to the correct things at this concert because they got it all wrong. But at this concert, I believe it was the one that Maddie Healy dedicated Falling for You to Taylor Swift. And I think, just based off of what I see from around that time period, that may have been a very special time. Whether it happened later on that night, whether this is that moment, or whether it happened at another time, or whether this is not even about Maddie Healy at all. I am just speculating. But I think it's very possible that dancing with no shoes in New York could have been around that time. I think sometimes with Taylor, she looks for like signs. Like, she's a very romantic person, and it seems like she believes in fatalism. She believes in fate. She believes that some things could potentially be meant to be, or at least she wants to believe that. She may question it a little, but I think that it's also important here that she ends this with, you know, she was dancing in New York with no shoes, looked up at the sky, and it was. And that is when she breaks down into telling us how red the situation was. That's literally what she's saying. She is saying, this is where she says, and loving him was red, but let me tell you how it was actually worse, and it was maroon, because she says, the burgundy on my t-shirt when you splashed your wine into me, and how the blood rushed into my cheeks so scarlet. It was, and she's not saying it yet. The mark they saw on my collarbone, the rust that grew between telephones, the lips I used to call home so scarlet. It was maroon. And also, just an aside, I think it's also very important here that she says, and I chose you, the one I was dancing with in New York. She's mentioned the one before, hasn't she?
Would have been fun if you would have been the one.
So everything that she's listing in this chorus is a form of red. Burgundy on my t-shirt. You splashed your wine into me. It's definitely red wine. The blood rushed into my cheeks, which is also like she is embarrassed or she is blushing, you know, something like that. The blood rushed into my cheeks so scarlet, red. The mark they saw on my collarbone, which I assume is some type of mark that would also be red. The rust that grew between telephones, red. The lips I used to call home, so scarlet, it was maroon. And of course, we can assume that her lips are red as well. But I think that all of this is important because in the chorus, she is literally just describing to us how freaking red it was. Like, she looks up at the sky and it was maroon. It was red. The love was there. It was like she is saying, like, loving him was so red, it was maroon, and I could feel it everywhere. Everything about the interaction was red. The burgundy on the t-shirt, you splashed your wine into me, the blood rushed into my cheeks, so scarlet, it was maroon. That is what she is telling us here, and she is putting it bit by bit, and I think almost making a fantasy out of potentially how they met, or a fantasy out of this interaction, because it seems like, you know, she is just the master of showing and not telling, right? She is not telling us really anything. She is only showing us. She is visualizing it to us. She is saying the burgundy on my t-shirt, which I assume is a wine spill from where he splashed your wine into me, and how the blood rushed into my cheeks so scarlet. So he is literally like bumping into her, splashing wine all over her t-shirt, and she is getting embarrassed because now she has this wine stain on her, and that is what I'm seeing here. Not being very specific here. She's just giving us images, and we obviously do not know what the mark that they saw on the collarbone was. We don't know who they are, but I can infer that the rust that grew between telephones would be just the fact that these people, from my read of this, had a very intense, a very insane connection to each other, but only for a very short time. They had this almost like fatalistic meeting that she is putting as essentially being like this fantasy of being maroon, of love being all over it, of this being like what was meant to be. But it was separated and it ended by the rust that grew between telephones because they just stopped talking. It's like it was, does it feel like second best after that meteor strike? You know, it's that moment. It's this meteor strike. And then as soon as you're not together anymore, it just dissolves. The rust that grew between telephones, the lips I used to call home, so scarlet, it was maroon. I also think the fact that she says it was so scarlet, it was maroon could also be important because she could be essentially referring to it as kind of like a scarlet letter situation. And I could see that as being a possibility if there was on again, off again with her and Joe during this time period, which I was listening to Glitch earlier. And she actually mentions like, depends on happenstances, situationships that she's in. So it's possible. And in verse 2, I think she's telling us more about what happened. She is saying, when the silence came, we were shaking, blind and hazy.
When the silence came, we were shaking, blind and hazy.
How the hell did we lose sight of us again?
How the hell did we lose sight of us again?
I think that this is important because she could just be, you know, reflecting on all of these relationships that she was in. She could be thinking like, maybe this was the one where we could have gotten it right. You know, how did we lose sight of us again? How does this keep happening? How does the person that I think I'm supposed to be with keep not being the person that I'm supposed to be with? How do we lose sight of us again? Continues saying, sobbing with your head in your hands. Ain't that the way shit always ends?
Ain't that the way shit always ends?
And I don't know if she's referring to the other person sobbing with your head in your hands, or if she's saying like just a general like sobbing with your head in your hands is the way that this always ends, because you end up being devastated. If you keep losing sight of what you want, what you need, keep losing sight of us, you are devastated. You were standing hollow-eyed in the hallway. Carnations you had thought were roses. That's us. And
Carnations you had thought were roses. That's us.
And I think that that is likely my favorite line from this song, because it's just such a good visual. The carnations you had thought were roses, that's us. And can't you picture, I don't know if she is literally being presented like carnations at this point, if like this other person had carnations for her and said that they were roses, or if she's just using it as a beautiful metaphor for something that you think is special that is not actually as special as you think that it might be. And I think that this is that in between of, are we just carnations? Are we roses? And I think that at this point, she's not sure, you know, like carnations you had thought were roses, that's us. But then she follows up and she says, I feel you no matter what, the rubies that I gave up.
I feel you no matter what, the rubies that I gave up.
And again, rubies are red. So she is essentially saying that I feel you no matter what I gave up. I feel you no matter the riches, no matter the love, no matter what. I can't stop feeling this, is what she's saying. But it's changed a little, because she goes, and I lost you, the one I was dancing with in New York, no shoes. So
I lost you, the one.
Where before she had chose you, now she has lost you, the one that she was dancing with in New York. And I think that that is incredibly important, because now we see that even though she chose it, she lost it. And from just other hints and other songs and things that I've been going through, I do believe that to some degree, if this is about Maddie Healy, that there was a moment where she was willing to risk it, and that it seems like he was not. I do not know any specifics, of course, but that is just what the lyrical tea leaves are giving me when they follow it up with this. I think that she was, at least to some degree, willing to risk it, and I don't know if it was her celebrity or what, but it didn't work out, and she ended up losing him instead. With looked up at the sky, and it was, and in the background we get maroon, but she doesn't say it.
Looked up at the sky and it was maroon.
The burgundy on my t-shirt when you splash your wine into me. And then once again, we have the breakdown of why it was red, but also why it was maroon, right? Because every single thing that she is mentioning here, it was so scarlet, it was maroon. And I don't know, of course, specifically what these images are going to mean for Taylor, because we do not have the benefit of living in her mind, but the images that she gives here reflect just this brief, intense relationship that she had where, you know, she believed that something was fated to be. She believed that there was this connection that was meant to be explored, and for whatever reason, she ended up losing it, even though she had previously chose it. I also think it is very important and worth mentioning when we're discussing maroon, that maroon, while it is a color, and I think that she is using maroon to reflect the red imagery from her previous discography, maroon, when used as a verb, also means marooning someone and leaving someone. So to maroon is to leave someone trapped and isolated in an inaccessible place, especially an island. So you could be saying that she is using maroon also to reflect the fact that she felt like she was marooned, or that she had marooned somebody else. And at the end, it was the rust that grew between telephones, the lips I used to call home, so scarlet, it was Maroon. And here we get to the bridge, and this bridge is so heartbreaking to me, but I believe it's also so incredibly freaking powerful for her. She says, "And I wake with your memory over me." That's a real fucking legacy. And then in the background we get "It was maroon," because she is saying again, it was red, it was maroon, it was love. That is what she is saying, because loving him was red. It's a real fucking legacy. It was maroon, and I wake with your memory over me. That's a real fucking legacy to leave. And that is the bridge. And honestly, it is freaking haunting, right? Just the imagery there of just her laying in bed and not being able to stop thinking about this night and about how she looked up at the sky and it was maroon, and she is looking up at the sky as if it's like a sign, as if it's like a signal, like I looked up at the sky and it was maroon, and she knew that loving him was red. And the definition of a legacy is a long-lasting impact of particular events, actions, etc. that took place in the past or of a person's life. Again, we have the chorus. The burgundy on my t-shirt when you splashed your wine into me, and how the blood rushed into my cheeks so scarlet. The burgundy on my t-shirt when you splashed your wine into me, how the blood rushed into my cheeks so scarlet. It was maroon. The mark they saw on my collarbone, the rust that grew between telephones, the lips I used to call home, so scarlet. It was maroon. On the top of my collarbone, the rust that grew between telephones, lips I used to call home, so scarlet. It was. And the outro, she ends it with, "It was maroon. It was maroon." So scarlet, it was maroon. And I just love this song. When Midnights came out, this was one of my top songs on the entire album. I was so incredibly hopeful that she would add it to the Eras Tour set, but unfortunately I have never been blessed to see Maroon live. But I think that this song is one of Taylor Swift's most powerful, and just like the way that she delivers it, like I think that there is just something captivating about how she states that it was maroon here. And I think that when you have followed Taylor Swift throughout her history and you're able to put together the growth of her lyricism from loving him was red to it was maroon, and you're able to put together those connections and see that, you know, the colors that she uses to describe feelings and the imagery that she uses, I mean, it's just, she is an artist, you know, she is a poet. This is exactly the type of thing that we look at when we explore literature. And I think that that's what people don't, you know, fully understand about Taylor, is that, like, at the end of the day, she is a lyricist, she is a writer, and we see the growth of her craft every song, every album. She improves and gets better, and to the point where just this imagery is captivating. And that's really where we are with Maroon. And I think that that is why so many people have been captivated by this song, because the imagery is visceral, you know, it's just, you almost feel like you are in that moment. You're looking up at the sky and you're feeling like it's maroon, that it's meant to be. And I think that at the end of the day, this song is powerful, and that's what she's saying. It's this visceral moment of feeling like you have this connection with another person, and that somebody understands you, and that they are the one, and then watching it be taken away, you know, because she chose him, but she lost him. And I think that this was written during one of those time periods in her life where she was reflecting, going back and forth, thinking, what if, you know, like, what if we did go back there? What if one thing had changed? You know, I think she was thinking about that too when she was reflecting on this, because we see a lot of that in other songs as well. It's just, if one thing had been different, would everything be different today? And, you know, she is literally talking about the one here, when in Folklore, the first track is The One. So we're definitely going to have a lot to talk about with this song. Please let me know what you guys' thoughts are in the comments. I would love to discuss. This is one of those songs that I think really each person is going to take from it something different through their own life experience, but I would love to discuss it and talk about the lore and what you think things may mean. Leave your comments down below. If you haven't followed me yet or subscribed to the channel, please do. It helps the channel out so much, and we have a lot to talk about. Let me know if you have any suggestions for me, and let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks. Bye.
maroon.